HighFleet from Microprose is way more complex than you might initially give it credit. As such, your initial gameplay experiences might be floundering somewhat, so I'm going to give you a few tips to get you up to scratch as quick as possible. When you're moving about the map, don't just go anywhere. Instead, really plan your routes wisely, even if you're being hunted. I'll explain more on that later. Each city has unique benefits, be it certain weapons, ammo, cheaper fuel or repairs, even enemy information or reserves. Depending on your situation, location and current ambition, make your next move a proactive one. Fuel, for example, is essential, so identify cheaper fuel locations if you need to fill up on fuel. And if you get the opportunity to buy fuel cheap, then fill up. That's my advice. Same thing applies with repairs. In some locations, they could be cheaper and quicker, so find the right cities to enable that facility. And expanding your army is another ongoing necessity, so follow any advice that you have. You don't always have to follow the lines between the cities. In fact, going off-road is quite often more advantageous. When you do go off-road, make sure that you check the ground radar button. You might find some stricken ships or hidden cities. Knowing where the enemy is very useful. So, locate the enemy by attacking their comm stations or intercepting their transmissions. If you do attack their comm stations, you will be given 5 comm points. Now you can use these to identify the location of enemy fleets. They each have a cost, 3, 2 or 1 per scan. The longer you stay there, the more chance you have of getting more scan points, but also risk the chance of getting discovered. If you do identify where a haulage ship is moving to, then try and plan an ambush, because taking haulage ships is a very good source of cash. If they don't know that you're there, if they don't know that you're coming, they're quite easy to take down. But there are times where they might actually put up a bit of a fight, especially if they are already aware of your presence in the area. Now, if you're intercepting scan messages, you may hear that they know that you're in the certain area and that every convoy will have additional support added. Try and ensure that your fleet has a mixture of armoured units and powerful guns in order to weaken difficult enemies. Then don't forget to have more agile, perhaps less powerful ships to dodge about and finish off the last few if necessary. Let's move on to fleet management. I recommend that you periodically send units off to attack cities whilst you're en route to a different city. So as you're heading north, attack locations to the east and the west that you can reach and get back to the main ship from. When you do defeat enemies in this way, or in any way actually, try and gather the fuel from crash sites first, if you can. Partly because, well, when they explode, they take other things with them and possibly kill some of your men. But more importantly than that even, is that whilst you are scavenging for everything else, you're actually refueling, which means by the time you've finished scavenging, you're already ready to leave. Now, radio rooms provide important information that enable you to unlock encrypted transmissions. You don't need to have all of the code in order to figure it out though. Basically, you'll get bits of paper and you can pick these up and move them around. On the very top, there are some hard-coded words. Just try and align those relatively close together and you will get some of the code. Then just sort of play with the additional dials and see if you can make any words appear in the transmission below. It doesn't have to be a long word. In fact, shorter words are often easier to do, and you only need one. It's easier than you think. Now, locating Tarkans can reward you with new ships or lots of money, so where you can, prioritize finding these first. Upgrading ships is a lot of fun, but it's also very time consuming and very costly. Try and prioritize your upgrades and use salvage that you already own. This will reduce cost and time. More fire extinguishers are always a good idea. Armour, as much as it does protect your ship, it actually slows it down. In fact, anything that you add to a ship will decrease the range that it can fly and quite possibly reduce the thruster weight ratio, making your ship less agile. Adding things like missiles or more missiles can also help a lot too. Adding a couple of bombs can also be very useful, and I'll discuss that more in a moment as well. But every single change that you make has a positive and negative effect to any of your ships. I highly recommend that you jump into the shipyard outside of a campaign and just create a few specialised ships yourself. I've already made a couple of crackers that I'm really happy with. You can watch those videos here. But yeah, if you're really wanting to get deep into the game and really understand how things go together, then this is a great place for you to go. And if you really want a specific type of ship, be it agile or heavily armoured or heavy firepower, then creating your own is a really great way to do it, because anything you create becomes available to you in the campaign. Let's go over some combat strategy and fighting tips. If you manage to surprise attack a city with a strike team, then the enemy will be grounded. At that point, if you have bombs, you can bomb them. You can then even follow up with some missiles if you have those. This will significantly damage even the hardest targets, and it will give you a distinct advantage. Be careful though, because they can still shoot at you from the ground with missiles and their guns. But if you've got a couple of bombs and you drop a couple of bombs on your enemies before they even manage to take off, that's going to give you a significant advantage. Now obviously movement in combat is key, but when do you move and where? Well, above each enemy is an icon that indicates when they are reloading, and a red line which appears when they are about to fire. There's also an arc that goes round some enemy ships, and that, I believe, is their missile guidance system. So if they've got secondary weapons, that's what that indicates there. When they're ready to fire, a red line will appear, and then you've got some idea of where the enemies are going to start shooting. Now as you play a little bit more, you'll start to see gaps and opportunities. Different weapons fire in different ways though. Some will lead on you, some will follow you, and some will spray and hope. You're going to have to play and sort of learn how they behave, and then learn how to deal with them. Only time and practice will really help you understand when and where to move. But use short bursts of jets to get you moving, and then stop if you can. One thing you've really got to keep an eye on is your engines overheating. There's a small green bar above your ship. If that gets too wide, your engines will overheat and shut down. Then you can't do anything at all for about 5 seconds. Bear in mind that using your shift button gives you a boost, and shifting up and launching vertically into the air is the quickest way to move. It's much faster than moving left, right, or down. And if you want to rotate your ship, then there are only certain ways that you can do that, and only certain ships can fully rotate. But you're going to have to experiment with that to really understand what I mean. I find it less useful to have a ship that fully rotates because the input system does not apply correctly. So pushing up when the ship is on the ground will make your ship go in a vertical situation. If you rotate it and press up and press the up key again, it won't then come back down to earth, which is what you would expect it to do. It will continue going up. So it's very confusing. And if anything, I think it makes things more difficult. Now, if you're getting attacked by missiles, and you will, you'll find that they're quite easy to confuse with chaff, but chaff is not 100% guaranteed. In fact, sometimes firing chaff will cause missiles that would have missed you to hit you. If you've got high enough round per minute weapons, then try and use them to shoot down missiles sometimes as well. But the best thing, the absolute best thing, is to either get out of the way, or, better still, get behind an enemy. Put an enemy between you and a missile and let the missile hit them. It's a lot of fun, very rewarding indeed. When you go into a combat situation, try and identify your retreat location early on and fight to keep that corner under your control. Otherwise you might get cut off, and then you've got a big problem. I've asked for the retreat area to be removed completely from the game and replaced with a keybind because I accidentally fly into it every now and then, and it's incredibly frustrating. Retreating is better than retrying. If you retry a battle, then you'll lose 1 round of morale. Once your morale reaches 0, then your fighters will refuse to fight. Now, even if you bring in additional ships that have higher morale, at the moment, they still refuse to fight. I assume that's a bug, but I don't know whether it's a conglomerate morale situation or an independent ship situation. I'm hoping it's ship independent, but you don't know for sure until the dev sort of confirms it, if you will. If you retreat though, you will get a second chance, but what you won't do is get extra fuel or ammo. So that's one of the things about retrying. It does cost you morale, but you get all of your fuel, your ammo, your fire extinguishers back, and you basically get to try again. So there are pros and cons to each solution. Now, in the worst case scenario, just try and get in between the 2 ships and get them to shoot at each other. I have actually managed to take down 2 ships without any guns, bombs or missiles on my ship at all. I didn't do it on purpose, but once I was in the battle, getting out of the way of their guns was the only thing I could do, and actually it's pretty effective. But other than shooting and hitting each other, which they both did quite often, I won that battle because they both ran out of fuel. Fuel is so important in this game. If you have more fuel than your enemies and you're quick enough to get out of the way of their guns, you're going to win that fight, even if you don't fire a single shot.
100 meters. Everyone get ready.
Each weapon, as mentioned, is totally unique. They're very, very different. I'd like to see more weapons in time, but right now the small collection that we have are completely unique. My recommendation is that you try a few and figure out what combos work best for you. Remember, you can have a main weapon, a secondary weapon, so the main weapon is fired on your left mouse trigger and the secondary weapon is fired on the right trigger. Get the right combo of weapons there and you become twice as powerful. Plus, you can have bombs which are fired with the middle mouse button, missiles which fire off the spacebar, even anti-air missiles which are fired off the C button. Now, I haven't really experimented with those very much. You'll find them on the bigger ships, but I haven't really played around with those in terms of combat, so there's another area there that you could explore. Plus, fire extinguishers which are on the B button and chaff which are on the F button. So these are your defense and attack options for any ship, but find a combo that works for you, because what works for me won't necessarily work for you. Find what feels good for you. Ship repair and resupply. Repairing and upgrading ships is expensive and time consuming, so landing your ship in a good location can dramatically reduce time to repair. Now, previously, if you didn't land a ship, you could then bring it down without having to land it in order to repair it. Now, I'm not sure if it's a bug or whether it's something that needs to be looked at overall, but right now, in order to get a ship onto the ground to be repaired, you have to land it. So in a recent example, I had a ship that had no legs, and when I tried to land it, despite landing it very, very, very carefully, the weight of the ship crushed something which then blew up the fuel tanks, and I lost the entire ship. Now, previously I have landed very badly damaged ships on their side, and that seems to work because it doesn't crush the fuel tank. But I guess when you're designing a ship, think about where the fuel is and try and have it higher up rather than lower down. And if you can, build in some rigid structure at the bottom, because right now at least, and it kind of makes sense, you know, how would you repair a ship if you can't land it? What I'd like to see long term is the ability to put broken ships onto your main ship, land your main ship anywhere on the ground, and then be able to do repairs on it. Now, that's something I haven't tried. Maybe that is how you do it. But right now, that's something that you're going to need to be aware of. Still, if you can land your ship in a good location, you can dramatically reduce the amount of time it takes to repair, up to about 200% quicker. That's a massive saving in time. Another way to save time and money is having the parts that you need to repair your ships on your ship already. So stock up on like-for-like parts where you can. Now, I don't think that holding repairable items on your ship in your hull increases ship weight. It probably should. I don't think it does, but to be honest with you, I'm not 100%, so it's best that you check that yourself. Don't forget, you're always going to need to resupply your chaff, your fire extinguishers, your bombs and your missiles, but not everywhere sells them. So if you happen to find some of the above items, buy them in bulk and store them on your ships in their hulls, maybe just on your main ship, and then you've always got some. If you can, then also try and store a few in each of your smaller ships, because that way they can go off, have a battle, land, resupply themselves, and then take off and go to the next target. There are numerous benefits to that, obviously, but mostly throwing the enemy off your trail, because if you're actually heading north and you're attacking cities to your east and your west, the enemy literally don't know where you are. One thing to remember, and this is really, really important, don't spend more than 24 hours in any location. 48 hours is my absolute maximum cutoff point. If you stay any longer than that, enemy sentries will identify that you're there and tell your enemies exactly where you are. Then you're going to have some big, big problems. I'll tell you what to do if that happens in a second. And if the price is right, if you get the opportunity, fill your tanks up fully. Get as much fuel into your tanks as you possibly can. You'll thank me for it. So, let's say, I've already spoken about comms and not staying too long in one city, but even when you do everything right, the enemy can and will still find you. Knowing the whereabouts of the enemy before they get to you is invaluable. Having fuel makes life even easier still. If you get spotted unexpectedly and perhaps even attacked, then all you have to do is simply identify where the threat is coming from, turn off the radar and leave in a direction that offers you sanctuary and ideally fuel. Now, you can change the radar to only scan once instead of continuously, and you can focus your scan to only scan in one direction. thereby making it harder for the enemy to locate your position. But in all cases, it really is better to leave it off completely until well clear of the threat. If their airplanes or missiles reach you, then the use of the C key to fire your anti-air missiles is enough to fight them off some of the time. 2 or 3 should be all you need, but also try shooting it down with any spray weapons that you might have with a high rate of rounds per minute fire. And don't forget to replenish your AA missiles after a fight if you survive. Now, the radar alert system is a little bit of a hypochondriac. It quite often screams more and louder than a Cessna stall warning system. If you have followed the advice that I've given you here, then you'll probably be fine. If you want to check that you're not being followed, then turn on single scan, pick a single direction, and if you discover more enemies there, just go back to the first tip, turn off the radar, change direction, make sure it's a good direction to go in, and hope for the best, basically. Now, whilst the radar is off, you do have a sonar system. Now, the sonar system is not my favourite thing. For one, you have to be incredibly close. For two, even when you are incredibly close and identify it, even the expanded system doesn't really show you or tell you anything useful. Everything looks like a missile to me. Perhaps everything I've seen is a missile. I don't really know. Now, there are other things that I can't talk about. The aircraft systems that are there are not currently active, so I can't talk about those at all. Down in the bottom right hand corner you have some switches there. They are to give you some indication of what chance you've got of creating a successful surprise attack on your enemies. If they've got radar, they'll detect you. If they haven't got radar, you're definitely going to get in there. The faster your ships are, the less likely they are to detect you, the more chance you've got of attacking them on the ground. Now, in the top right hand corner we've also got some serious weapon firepower there. Now, I haven't got into a position where I've been able to use those yet, so that's going to have to come as part of my advanced tutorial. Don't worry, you're going to be playing a good couple of hours before you need to be using any of that stuff. Next to that though, in between the radar alert system and those fire control systems, you have a communication control. This is where all your allies are. Now, if you look at each of your allies, you'll see that they've got stars up, and you can ask them for assistance. You can ask them for information, you can ask them for money, you can ask them for ships. When you do that, you lose a star. Now, as you communicate with them and you talk to them, you can increase and decrease the amount of stars that they have. So if you get to a maximum of 4, you might as well use them, because you can never have more than 4. If you get down to 1, be very careful, because if it goes down beyond 1, they will leave your army and you will be fighting without them. Now, I've spoken to quite a few people about this game. It seems that a lot of you out there are quite excited about it, and one of the best suggestions that I've heard so far is that each enemy ship has a weakness. Now, I haven't got to the place where I've been studying each ship and I know where their weaknesses are. What I tend to do is look at the radar or the screen down in the bottom right hand corner and identify where they have taken damage, and then try and continuously hit them in that same area to do the maximum amount of damage. It really isn't that easy, but certainly there is proof in the pudding that every ship has a weakness, and if you can identify what that weakness is, you can definitely do more damage to them and destroy them more quickly. Now, it seems to be that most of the ships have their armour on the top and on the sides. I tend to put my armour on the bottom because I prefer to be above attacking down rather than below attacking up. Depends on the ship I'm fighting. But like I say, I'm not an expert yet. I'm just trying to give you some tips and suggestions to get you up to speed as quick as possible. And I hope it helps. If you've got any suggestions, recommendations, corrections even from the stuff that's in this list, please do write it in the comment section. I'll be interested to read it, and you might help somebody else out, which is the reason why I make this video, really. And hopefully, we're all going to have a bloody good time out there. Until next time, take care.